Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the daily medicine transmission for July 27th, 2021, as the swamp drains. It's kind of a little joke, isn't it? As the world turns, as the swamp drains, it's not an immediate effect for anybody that has ever drained anything with substantial amount of water in it before. You know how long this takes. So we're going to be addressing some another massive shift that just happened, as we saw with the Schumann yesterday. We're going to talk about today's reading, which really is setting us up to get back into the roots, just like we talked about yesterday. And then with the astrology for today, the moon is still in Pisces for the duration of the day. She'll be going void, of course, at 9:12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and will be making her way into Aries tomorrow. So we are really finishing up and coming into a consolidation period here as we finish our moon transit in Pisces, right? And Mercury comes into Leo today. So there is kind of this emergence energy that is making itself known right now with Mars at Regulus, with Mercury coming into Leo, but we have Venus in Virgo right now in a conjunction with Alpha Draconis. So lots to talk about in terms of getting back down into the roots, just because we see here with today's imagery, we see here with the stump that's coming out of the swamp, there is so much more going on down there, and it's a process for this for the swamp to drain. So welcome back to everyone who are my subscribers and the regular viewing audience for this channel. Truly, you are the lifeblood of this channel. And if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for being here. And as always, whenever you interact with this content by liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting on the content, you actually do support the growth of this channel and the spreading of the message. It actually does impact, sorry guys, it does actually have an impact on the AI that sends out these messages, spreads out these messages, and spreads it to a larger audience. So welcome everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and taking good care of themselves. Yesterday was pretty interesting. The Schumann spiked pretty strong. I think it made its way up to about 74 hertz by the end of it, and now has tapered back off and is at a much slower frequency and oscillation. I haven't fully checked in yet, but there does seem to be another CME that has been released from the sun as of yesterday. So there's that connection again where the Earth comes into connection with the sun directly as it is leaving the sun, these CMEs, but at the same time our electromagnetic field is in fact weakening. So there's just so much here that we could spend so much time exploring, just in terms of solar weather, for instance, and space weather. So I will weave that in as it's appropriate, because people are really interested and connected to the electromagnetic field of the planet, right? The Schumann resonance is the frequency of the electromagnetic field of the planet. And you may have found yourself yesterday like not being able to sleep. I was very energized yesterday. Also, this can express itself in headaches, in ear ringing, and dreams, very substantial dreams, especially with the moon in Pisces, going to meet Neptune retrograde today. So how have your dreams been? Have you been getting insight into what's going on in that subconscious of ours? Have you been touching on the areas that need more attention for you? Because I suspect, and what I am getting, especially as we move closer, now that we've passed this full moon, we'll be moving into a Leo new moon on the Lion's Gate on 8/8. Really, really big opening, huge opening and portal, and an opportunity for us to all step forward in our power and make a commitment to being together, to bring our resonance together. That's what this next new moon is going to represent on the Lion's Gate. This is really important. And the fact that we are going through what we're going through now is like practice. It's like a scrimmage, right? And we've made a commitment to follow through with this process, come hell or high water, for better or for worse, right? And everything that we've been experiencing, especially with this full moon, showing us how that spreads to a collective context, how when we release what is within us and allow it to be shared with the world, it does have an impact. Sometimes it's an impact that we didn't anticipate. Sometimes it's unexpected, and it's usually very powerful. And the full moon showed us what we needed to release, and also what has culminated that is worth hanging on to, or I mean, that's not the right phrase, but to incorporate into what we are currently doing, this sanctified, productive relationship that we've committed to with this new moon cycle within us, right? And it's about stabilization, about connecting to the core of who we are, connecting to that which we are loyal to and faithful to, whether it be our heritage, our traditions, our family, right? Our spiritual family, maybe just our nation, the family of humanity in and of itself, but it's about us as individuals. That Cancer archetype is about the individual character developing. So something really shifted yesterday, and as the swamp drains, even though it is in some ways like a soap opera, and in some ways you are watching a scripted event, that is in no way indicative that we should sit back and do nothing. Because even in those introverted, quiet moments where we are allowing inspiration to come in, that's still an active process. And as we're going to see in today's reading, it's important that we do take action to cultivate and to prepare the space for what's coming in. And we may have thought we've gotten somewhere, right? And perhaps we've gotten a little sloppy. Perhaps we've been a little complacent or apathetic. Perhaps we thought that what we have experienced thus far was a really good indication of how far, how much growth and production has happened. And we may find ourselves very disappointed, or certainly, the sobering realization of what is, as opposed to the illusion we may have been operating under, is really presenting itself today. So let's get right into the reading and show you guys. Now, one thing I'd like to mention is that I'm going to start moving the live broadcast to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It gives me a little bit more time to really collect myself and to get some more writing done before I broadcast, just to really bring together more resources as well, because not everybody is able to sit with this broadcast, and that makes sense. Everybody's lives are different, and so there's other options that I want to offer. So I need some more time in the morning in order to really gather all of these things. So I'm going to start moving the broadcast to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Okay, so I will make that known on social media as well. So let's look at the reading and get ourselves in the zone here of energetic. So something did really change. And, it could be as simple as that CME was released from the sun. The Earth's Schumann resonance really spiked in response to that, going, okay, I know something is coming. It's making its way here. It could be a connection to the collective human consciousness, making a shift, coming to more awakening. And that very well could be. There is this relationship now. I'm going to bring the reading up so we can look at it while I'm speaking to you. That somebody had brought that up in the Telegram chat. Is it possible that these spikes in the Schumann are also directly connected to shifts in the human consciousness, right? The more awakening that happens, the more awareness, right, that happens as a result of truth coming out, of more information being exposed, all these types of things. And with Mercury coming into Leo today, right, the blood rushing right to our head, really this eruption within us of that energy that sits at the base of the spine, right? The coiled serpent of the Kundalini, moving right up into our brain and kind of waking us up. And that will, if we have not been very realistic about what's going on, and we have been kind of just sitting back and watching, and thinking that we are part of some grand operation and not to do anything, I think this is where this disappointment is really going to come in, and it will necessitate this trek back into introversion, into going within the darkness within us, and to really do the work on the inside, which is the Virgo element. Venus is in Virgo now. Mars is soon to be in Virgo. And this is not the work that most people want to do, right? The 6th house in the Virgo house is usually... that work is usually, not all the time, but a lot of times it is brought about by some sort of crisis, some sort of healing crisis, hidden enemies coming out of the woodwork, right? It is all of the things that really surface as a result of actually doing the work under the surface. And so it's inevitable, right? When we choose to go into this space and commit to it, that we are going to be digging up our shadow. We're going to be confronting the demons. We're going to have to be moving through the soil and the medium of our growth in order to utilize all of the resources available to us, just like a plant would do during Virgo season, right? The roots and the stabilization of the roots, the health of the roots, that is the Cancer archetype. The health and stability of those roots are what actually does the work during Virgo time in terms of a plant and its growing cycle. So we are going to be kind of carried back into this place. And of course, Saturn here is really structuring and giving us a boundary and almost a fortress in some ways to block everything else out in order for us to really connect to this inspiration that comes from a quiet moment, right? Not being inundated from the outside. So there's, like I said, as the swamp drains, you see more and more of what has been hidden under the surface in the murky waters. But remember, just like with the lotus yesterday, getting back to the roots, you can get all the way down to where there is solid ground and embed those roots, even in the murkiness, even in what is dark and inaccessible. But right now, there is this emergence. Just a bit as the swamp drains, we're seeing more and more of that root system. You know, those old dead trees that are just stumps that you didn't even know were there until the swamp started draining, right? And this has been a process over many years and will continue, I think, at least until 2024 when Pluto comes into Aquarius. And that's going to be that's going to be the beginning of that to me marks the real transition into the age of Aquarius. Not officially in it, but that's really where things are going to start ending so that it can begin again, right? Because that's what Pluto represents. So I'm getting ahead of myself here, but a lot of things are coming through very strongly right this moment. And it would not be, there's nothing to be said for squashing these messages as they're coming through. So let's start looking at this reading because I want to show you where we're at here. So the 3 of discs is the works. Okay, so Mars in Capricorn, first of all, as you see in this imagery, Mars in Capricorn, right? Mars in Capricorn is exalted. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. What does that mean? That means that it is in its power. It's not in its rulership, but it's in familiar territory. So it's still very powerful and still able to express itself very strongly in this sign of Capricorn. So the works, right? Mars is putting its effort and its ambition and its courage to act and its drive to act on itself and its self-interest, right? Mars is the warrior, right? It's a very singular focus here on something, building something, right? The works. And if you look at this imagery, you see the pyramid and you see at each side, there is like essentially this like spinning disc, and each of these represents, you have Mercury, you have sulfur, and you have salt. And these might be interchanged. I can't remember. So you have these inorganic elements, and you even have the liquid mercury here on surrounding it that seems to be pushed away by these spinning discs, right? Kind of like a chakra in some ways. And so the works, right? This is us putting energy into a situation in order to, it's like an alchemical wedding, right? And we talked about, this is the new moon, again, in terms of ritualizing, sanctifying this productive relationship, a wedding, right? The Sabian symbol of the new moon, of the cycle we're still in, is that sanctification, a priest performing a marriage ceremony. It is the sanctification of this alchemical process. And we talked about this yesterday too, sitting right on the surface at the heart is this alchemical process. So when it's reversed, as we find here in our causal factor coming into the moment, so in its essence, it's the crystallizations of the power of Capricorn, cardinal earth, things actually happening and building. So, and it's an admission, right, that progress was made. It's the three. So there is stability in the three angles of the triangle, right? Showing us that we've gotten somewhere. There is some sort of achieved status. Now, with it reversed, okay, there is neglect after our first gain, right? I just talked about this, complacency, some sloppiness, right? Maybe we didn't do it right the first time. Maybe we didn't put enough effort in, or we stopped in the middle of the work, right? That's another way to interpret this. Or the achievement is just not what we thought, right? We put this energy in, and if you look at it reversed, you can see that the Mercury here is really is inverted. It's facing downward, right? And perhaps we have not been putting our energy to develop and to crystallize and to really achieve some sort of some measure of success has not been towards our highest goal, but in self-preservation, in ego-based needs, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that when we see that we are really putting our energy towards these kind of base things and not and this goes back into the conversation about what is personal abundance, what is wealth, what are resources, how does that translate out into the collective. Self-preservation will lead you to make decisions that actually are betraying your higher self and not even realizing it, because we are physical beings. We act out of survival and self-preservation, and that's something that is instinctual, even at a mental, logical level. So there may have been this, right, that this energy and this focus on building something, the alchemical wedding, right, the crystallization of cardinal creation in a material way. There's more work that's needed, but what we are dealing with here is there's something off about what has been achieved so far. There's either sloppiness, there's neglect, we stopped in the middle, right? We just lost momentum, and the achievement is not what we thought. And this reversal, like I said, it really does feel to me that a lot of it are especially our mental energies, and Mercury is coming into Leo, right? And so this is important to keep in mind, because now that the blood is rushing to the head, the ambition has been spurred again. This can work in our favor as we address what's going on, but it's not going to be solely in the ambition. We're going to have to go back in some ways, and it's all over this reading that we're going to have to go back in. We're going to have to go down deep. We're going to have to chip away. We're going to have to stand in our power and be mindful of the fact that as the swamp drains, we see more and more that has been hidden from us. Okay. And what do we feel? And what do we, address here when that happens? Well, here's our 5 of Cups. So another Mars card. Mars is really at the forefront today because it is coming into conjunction with Regulus, Archangel Raphael. So there's a miracle that is on the way here, I would say, healing and blessings. But before that happens, we have to deal with the disappointment, the emotional crisis that comes from unconscious fears coming true, the loss of illusion, right? We may have been completely misled in terms of what we are all contributing to building together, and now we face this realization of deception, and the loss of illusion, and that crisis that comes along with it. Mars and Scorpio, and we have Antares. Black Moon Lilith is in conjunction with Antares today, so this is very strong, and could really set us back if we are not aware of it and prepared for what it may feel like. And you could even be aware of this and you'll still have some measure of experience of this loss of illusion, this crisis. Maybe you're just empathing it from other people and really feeling your unconscious fears like coming to the surface. These are all ways this is expressed, but this is at the heart of today. And with the moon in Pisces, right, everything kind of dissolves into everything else. There are no more boundaries here between how we feel and how everybody else feels. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then the moon is going to move into Aries by tomorrow morning. So right now, as the moon is finishing her transit of Pisces and we are connecting very directly into the collective unconscious, it's important to realize that we are, we have the opportunity to feel into this and have some compassion if we are not directly feeling this loss of illusion, the realization of deception. And this, like I said, this can come up in many different ways. Even if we're already kind of aware of it, we may still connect very deeply and emotionally and intuitively with how the collective is feeling as the swamp drains and more of what's been hidden comes to the surface. And it's not really coming to the surface, right? It is, in fact, just being shown in its totality, just like an iceberg, right? Everything is at the bottom and you just see this tiny bit at the top. But that tiny bit at the top at least shows you that there's a whole network underneath. But what we're doing is at the heart here is acknowledging and being aware of the disappointment, the Five of Cups that is Mars and Scorpio. So Mars is really leading the charge quite literally today, especially coming into conjunction with Regulus, which is the heart of the lion, okay? Now, I think that many of us are, this is a collective read as well, as we've talked about many times, and I think that people are losing a sense of connection to their higher self. They have lost a connection to their spirit team, and especially when we are in a state of disappointment, disillusionment, kind of shock, realizing that what we've been contributing to has actually been an inverted crystallization, right? We're crystallizing something, but it's inverted towards self-preservation or somebody else's agenda, for instance. And in the heart of it, with the disappointment, at the root here is really this losing sight of our purpose, right? And our contact with the higher self. Add some, right? I am here. You can see in this imagery here that this individual, although she is absorbing information, reading, studying. Her counterpart here is bringing in more material to study, right? She's sitting at a desk, right? There's another open book, but she is also realizing in the midst of this study, and as we're going to see here at the top of this reading is the scribe. So there is this imagery here that is important in terms of learning and educating ourselves and researching and increasing our knowledge base. There's also, we have to realize, I am here. Your higher self is here. Your angels are here. Your spirit team is here. Your guides are here. Your ancestors are here. And to realize that they never leave. And it's really easy to feel like we're alone, especially starseeds. I think it's getting more pronounced every day, feeling so isolated and alone, when in fact there are more people waking up now than there ever have been. So it's kind of an illusion in some ways, but it can be as we're coming to terms with this deception, right, on a mass scale, we could really be rooted into and subconsciously feeling like we've been abandoned, right? So we lose sight of our purpose and contact with higher self. It's time to do work. And as I said, there is also energy in this reading that brings this back, right? We have to actually do work. We have to prepare the ground. We have to till it. We have to chip away, right? We got to pull all the rocks out of the soil, whatever it is. So don't desert yourself. You have to take some action towards your purpose every day. Some action, right? Anything that puts you back in touch with your higher self and your God nature, right? The spark of your soul. Excuse me. Oh, 1 second, guys. Okay. So as we travel up the spine here of our vertical axis of power, where our attention is, though, is that there's more information to take in, right? This is a great upsweep in mind and study when you get the scribe. And what is the number 12? It is the 12th house in Pisces, which is where the moon is. So it's important that we do understand in our awareness here, even though we know deep down we're feeling this loss, right? We're feeling disconnected. We're feeling abandoned. and at the heart of things, this disappointment with having to come to realization. But at the awareness, at the very least, is that there's more information to take in, there's more to learn, there is more to study. We need to, I would say, give ourselves the opportunity to take in more information. Remember, the scribe isn't transmitting necessarily, they are recording everything, and that allows them to be so much more educated about a range of subjects, because they're writing it all down, they're recording all of it, and not necessarily processing it or analyzing it, just recording it, which is what happens. The Akashic records are just a recording of everything that ever has been or will be. And so in some ways we are aware, and our attention is focused on, recording all of these experiences, recording, and also studying and learning based on everything that's available to us. And we have to get more subtle, right? The mouse is, letting us know that there are other ways to communicate and receive communication as well. It's not just verbal, body language is important, and, getting into caution and scrutiny, like really the subtle forms of communication as well are part of that. But we do see, and we are aware of, and we, our focus consciously is on this absorption of this recording of information to learn and to study more. And this is also very connected to ATSM, right? They are studying, they are learning, they're reading. And it's that moment of remembering that there is a whole unseen realm that is surrounding us at every moment as we are going through this process of educating and learning. Because what to expect here is some introversion, of course, right? Here's our Hermit again. So the Virgo card, we have Venus in Virgo. Mars is going to come into Virgo as well very soon. So we have this really strong, not only upsweep and study, but it's really study of ourselves. This card is also connected to Saturn in Aquarius, and Saturn is in Aquarius right now, retrograde in Aquarius, at a degree that brings our attention to the need to be in a quiet moment of reflection in order to receive inspiration. So we're going to be led back down into the depth again of ourselves, like into the medium of our own growth, and analyzing and utilizing what's there for our growth. So it does require that we retire from the outside world and get into introversion and be able to go into the depth and the darkness of who we are and the medium of our growth in order to pull that light out. You see the imagery all through this card. You have Cerberus, the three-headed dog at the gates of Hades, guarding it. You see that the Hermit has the light in its hand, and it's got this really balanced geometric shape shining off in a direction. Now there's light coming from a different source, which I think is really interesting too. It's off. You don't even see where it's coming from. I think that's really interesting, actually. I never really noticed that. You have the serpent here that is coiled around the egg, right? So we see this idea of the serpent energy and the kundalini directly connected to the new cycle, right? The encompassed seed of the new cycle. And you're surrounded by the grain, right? Which is the Virgo energy as well, right? The sustenance that allows us to, be nourished and to grow and to survive. And so all of this energy, we're going back into a period of realization and mental maturity because we need to. Because otherwise, if we don't, we are setting ourselves up to just be hopeless, or to get even more complacent, or to be just like completely delusional, right? We're going to have to go into, and this disappointment, whatever, however it manifests itself, or if you're feeling it from other people or just witnessing it unfold, realize that it needs to be this way. When we come to realize that what we've been contributing to has actually been an inverted form of reality, that is a really sobering realization for the masses, right? And it will, in fact, force us into a trajectory where we go back within, right? We go back within ourselves, and we have to do the work in ourselves and get into the depth of ourselves. And people I think, really struggle with this because we want to think we have it all figured out. And it's an endless process as the swamp drains, right? As the world turns, our own swamp is draining too. And that's the best thing that we can do for all of us, is to acknowledge our own swamp, how it's draining, and learn what we can, and to do the work within us. And, like I said many times, Venus doesn't really like to be in Virgo, okay? She is exalted in Pisces. So she is in her fall position in Virgo. She is not powerful in Virgo. So when it comes to our sensitivity to these issues, when it comes to what makes us or allows us to feel comfortable and safe and secure, or balanced, right? Aesthetically balanced, that's the Libra part of Venus. When she's in Virgo, she doesn't want to do the work. She just wants to be sensitive and be in the feel of it, right? Of what's harmonious and balanced. Well, we actually have to work these systems. We have to work our relationships. We have to do the work in our material realm. And part of that is going into the depth of who we are. And this is a really, this is also, Venus is at her detriment in Scorpio, for instance. These are, Virgo and Scorpio have an interesting connection to each other, right? Because Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Mercury can go into the depths of Scorpio, in that 8th house area that's ruled by Pluto, and come back out, right? And so this ability to use our minds and our consciousness to actually go into the depths of ourselves and come back out is an incredible power. And again, Mercury moving into Leo today is going to be an asset in some ways if we can maintain that serpent energy coiled around the snake coiled around the egg, the embodiment of the new cycle. So some guidance here along the way, as per usual. We're never left alone. Okay, guys. This is like 4 days in a row that the polar bear has come out, right? So people need to start speaking truth, and not be afraid of how it's going to be received. And there are many people that maybe this is going to be really scary for them. And other people need to do it to show, to be an example, to come out and speak truth, stand up for yourself, right? In terms of what has been foisted upon all of us, right? And speak your truth compassionately, no attachment to outcome. Because if you are attached to the outcome, it's going to reinforce your disappointment even more. And I'm not saying that we should just accept being controlled, or we should not stand up for ourselves. You can stand up for yourselves and speak truth with compassion and no attachment to outcome, because you're standing in your power, right? And you're coming from your heart space. And with Mars in conjunction with Regulus today and tomorrow, specifically today, the heart of the lion is very much being in the heart of the warrior, right? The heart of the lion is in the warrior today, as there is this yearning to really come forward. So this polar bear, for as much as it doesn't seem like a lion, it keeps coming out because it's important that we stand up for ourselves, right? We are sovereign beings. Nobody has the right to make decisions about what we do with our personhood. No one, right? And we need to speak this, but the attachment to the outcome is where we end up getting back into disappointment and get back into a cycle of feeling hopeless or complacent or apathetic, because when things happen that we don't like, or we're attached to an outcome that doesn't happen, it kind of, we find ourselves deflating, right? Or thinking we're on the wrong path. So this keeps coming up. So embody this as much as you can, because there's a reason that this comes up over, and this is 4 days in a row. Okay. Now, part of that too is Uriel in the Sphinx. And we'll get into Antares when we get into the chart, because Black Moon Lilith is meeting Rahu, the North Node, and they're both in conjunction with Antares. Antares is a fixed star. That's one of the four royal fixed stars related to Archangel Uriel, the fire of God. So this particular card represents our the Sphinx is the silent holder of truth, right? The Akashic records underneath the Sphinx. That was part of Edgar Casey's, one of his readings. whether or not it is a literal, like, let's dig under there and find some actual scrolls. It seems to me it's more about what is underneath the Sphinx. The foundation of where that was built to begin with holds a lot of the records of human civilization that is way deeper than we are being told. But in terms of an esoteric practice, in terms of our own process of discovery, we have to dig. We have to dig and get into inner discovery that takes us to our deeper self. And this is part of the action that we can be taking to fulfill our purpose and reconnect to our higher self. It's so interesting. As above, so below, right? We have to dig in. We have to get down into the underbelly of who we are, where we come from, what subconsciously and unconsciously makes its way up to the surface. What is it down at the depths of who we are? And Uriel is the fire of God, right? The sting of the heart of the scorpion. There's our disappointment right there. And what we do with this today is really going to make a difference in how we move forward within ourselves, right? And as a collective, there's no separation now, right? There's no separation. Everybody's resonance counts so equally at this point. Everybody's resonance counts towards the collective in a way that it never has before, because more people are waking up. And this is just what's needed for humanity, a sovereign humanity. And the age of Aquarius the highest version of this age of Aquarius that doesn't descend us into an AI timeline is that every single human is equally as valid as every other human. And when we can do that in a way that we respect each other, and we can do that in a way where we acknowledge each other and everybody's resonance is equally valid, even if we don't agree with it, that's how we get to the highest version of the age of Aquarius. Okay. But we have to do this work. We have to chip away. And Antares and Uriel, the fire of God, gives us the energy and the power to really chip away at these surfaces, right? To really chip away at this rock-like structure that's like embedded deep in our collective unconscious, right? That's a very Piscean thing as well. That collective unconscious in the 12th house, and to chip away to get to the truth. It's just truth, right? Truth stands on its own. It doesn't need anybody to clarify or qualify it. And it's not based on, postmodernism and cultural relativism. It's a slippery slope. That's, in terms of truth or my truth, because your truth and my truth can be vastly different things. And how do we function that way? So this is about getting into the depth of who we are and doing the work and utilizing the fire of God, the sting of the scorpion in order to wake up, right? The sobering realization of the 5 of Cups that is brought about by the sting of the scorpion, the depth of the power dynamics in relationships. This is where truth is found, is in the Scorpio realm. And our transformation is powered by Pluto, for instance. So we've talked about the polar bear, of course. And then when we move up to our conscious awareness, we see the mouse. Okay, this saying overlooking important details, so pay closer attention to what's going on. So this means utilizing the scrutiny and the caution and the subtle cues, right? Pay attention to contracts and obligations. Again, Juno also in conjunction with Antares, asteroid Juno, right? She represents these contracts, these obligations, the connection between each other in relationship, and what's balanced and fair, and how betrayal fits in when there is a contract. Because if somebody breaks that contract, that is a betrayal of the trust and the arrangement, right? So pay attention here to the contracts and obligations. Be more cautious, be willing to pick up on things like subtle cues, body language, really listen to people instead of just, absorbing what they're saying as the truth without anything to back it up, right? Really listen to people. And this goes both ways, right? You can listen and really listen to people when they speak to you in ways that you're just like, I don't agree with that, but really listen to what they're saying. Get into the body language, get into the subtle cues, sit back and observe. This is how a mouse survives, is being tuned in to these very subtle changes. And this is part of the upsweep and study too, because with the Four of Forces being spring, we know that we're entering a time where we have to prepare the ground and for growth, right? And this is goes back to where we are with the Virgo energy and the Hermit, and also too with Adsum and even Uriel. It's important that we're preparing the ground. We're preparing the ground for growth. It's important to put a little bit more time into laying the groundwork, right? And the work that's getting done now is going to yield more results, right? And so it's important that we see this and that we put some more energy into cultivating the medium of our growth right now. And part of that is really taking in all of the information, all of the experiences, all of the different subjects that the scribe would be recording, all of the subtle cues, all of the body language. As much as you can, take it in and put that towards conditioning the soil, right? Because Pisces time normally is one of the most difficult times a year because everything is dissipated and we don't feel personally empowered, and it's the last stage before the seed becomes viable to be planted. And this is kind of where our conscious awareness could be right now, is realizing that we're coming to the end of this cycle within us personally, right? The moon in Pisces. And so we can put our energy into cultivating the ground and being aware of the more subtle things that we may have missed, right? Oh, I didn't, I should go back over and make sure I pulled all the stones out of the ground. Oh, I should, make sure that the soil has the right pH level. I should, it's important to go through and mix the mulch in, whatever it is, or just pay attention to what is or isn't in the land. That's the other thing too. Pay attention to just what is or isn't in the medium of our growth. As this cycle of the moon in Pisces, because when she comes into Aries tomorrow, this is when we're going to all feel, activated on some intuitive level. Okay. So this reading, it seems at first really like, counterproductive or counterintuitive, right? Because, more people are awake than they ever have been. But as the swamp drains, it's going to become more chaotic. We're going to see more. And that is going to inevitably lead to these feelings of disappointment and the waking up of disillusion, and ultimately going to lead us back into ourselves and into that medium of our growth that we've gone through so far, right? And how we've gotten here. And this is why it's important to really dig down in and really look at things and be willing to look at the more subtle things and not just take things verbatim because they're what we want to hear, but take it all in. This is where the Orion starseeds have been instrumental in the last 6 months. Well, I'd say the last 2 years, but really since that Mercury retrograde. Be willing and able to take in all forms of information and really sit with it, really scrutinize it, because that is going to be the medium for the growth moving forward. And we talked about this yesterday. We are aware that there's a new phase coming in. We are aware that an old phase is leaving, right? But we have to make sure that we prepare the ground and prepare the medium for this growth. And that's a big part of the Virgo energy too, right? And like I said, Mercury going into Leo right now is going to really activate things in our mind. And we have to make sure that we are not letting it run away from us, but actually applying it to the right places. So let's look at the chart for today to see how we can best utilize this energy in real time, right? That's what we're looking at, in real time. So here's our chart for today. It's the 27th, and we're just going to go through this piece by piece. So we're going to look at the current transits. And as you see here, the moon is coming swiftly up to meet with Neptune. So, this is something. Okay, hold on one second. Sorry. Let's go back a little bit here. Let's go back and look at the very beginning of this day and the transits. So a couple things. Mercury like I said, is going to be moving into Leo today. Venus is in conjunction with Alpha Draconis, okay? Fixed star Thuman, or Alpha Draconis. This is a big Draco starseed activation, my friends. Big. I'm going to make sure to add that into the description for this video, because this is very strong. And I'm going to explain to you how the Draco starseeds not only are instrumental right now, but also in this particular aspect, embodying the light of the Draco starseed signature is going to be essential for right now, because the with Mars at Regulus, the potential here is to act on things coming up into the surface, to act on them, to act from them. We have Regulus, and I'm not saying that that's good or that's bad. It depends on where it's at in your chart, but there's something to be said for the ability to wait, right? The ability to be in the stillness and wait for the right time to act. That is what a reptile does, right? They act out of self-preservation, but if you ever watch most reptiles, they stay still until it's time to strike. And there is something to be said for that. And Venus, this is how we can utilize this energy right now today. Okay, so it'll come back around. But let's talk about here. We talked about that. Venus, Mars in conjunction with Regulus. All right. So first we had the moon in a sextile with Neptune. Can't even. All right, so this is happening 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time overnight. So the moon in Pisces already dream state, very vivid, very active, in a sextile with Uranus in Taurus, right? This degree of Taurus is really putting our head down and braving the storm, because that is part of the natural process of living in the material world, right? That there is sunshine and then there is rain. And there is expansion, and then there's retraction. And so there is clear skies, and then there's a storm. And this is where Uranus is, and giving us the trigger for radical transformation through the braving of this storm, to really get our character is really revealed in this type of degree. And so the sextile here, this degree of Pisces, is very interesting. We talked about this yesterday, how a lot of admirals and generals, for instance, are born with Sun in Pisces, right? Because that is giving all, right? That is giving of yourself entirely to the collective. You are indistinguishable from the medium of the collective, and how it's held together through love and compassion, and through the morphogenetic field, right? This is something outside of our material awareness and palpability, right? Pisces is the ocean, but it's also the ocean that connects all of humanity. So, and all of life, it's the vibratory field from which everything comes, the Akashic field. So this particular degree that the moon is in a sextile, and so there's an investment here in terms of the feeling, right, of Pisces, and the sensitivity of Taurus to the natural world. There's like, it's like in a simulated assault, right? And it's like a practice. And I very much felt like everything leading up to this full moon, and probably throughout the rest of this cycle, is in fact kind of a practice. It's practicing our ability to step into our sovereign nature as an individual and come together. That's going to be the Lion's Gate. So in the meantime, we're practicing. We are going through simulated types of situations in our personal life, in a microcosm, that is going to translate to the macro eventually, very soon. And this sextile here, we can make an investment of this energy of us personally with the moon, personal, feeling-based, intuitive-based, that we are in a practice run. Again, it's like a scrimmage, right? But fully engaged, right? Leading the troops into a simulated assault, but there's still live ammo, right? It's still not an enemy that's doing it, but it's a practice. It's a scrimmage, right? And we can apply this to where Uranus is, which is really the collective third eye, the collective trigger for awakening, that is really, brought forward right now in our ability to really brave the storm, and our character is really being revealed as a result of it. So we can invest these energies into each other to really get the most out of the harmonization between Pisces and Taurus, right? And the moon is actually exalted in Taurus, and so there is a certain amount of trust and a certain amount of comfort with where Uranus is at in Taurus, in terms of like, yeah, I know I can brave the storm because I can intuitively and emotionally, you know, how I adapt to reality is by embedding myself in the medium. It holds me emotionally, and so there's a beautiful investment, and this really, I'm sure, made itself very, at least it did to me. Wow. My dream state reflected this sextile almost perfectly, and I don't want to go into it too much here, but what I will say is that it reflected this, like this, what's going on in the microcosm, kind of in our own little zone, is like it's like a scrimmage. It's like a simulation that is going to help us in the coming months when it comes out into the macro. As the swamp drains, we're going to see more and more, and we need to acknowledge this and find some sort of balance, and, you know, really capitalize on the harmony here. So as the moon does its a dance here, we're also going to find that Mercury is in a sextile, so it's in the last degrees of Cancer. It's actually in a sextile with asteroid Ceres in Taurus, at the very last degrees of Taurus as well. And so again, another sextile with water and earth again. And, you know, Mercury, again, it's like you're coming into this realm here where you know inside of you that there are these two alternatives, and the only real way to come to a decision about something truly is to weigh the alternatives within you, not outside of you. So in our consciousness, in the ability and our ability and the way that we conceive of information, the way that our mind works, the way that our mental faculties and our nervous system works, it's really bringing us back into the very core of who we are, and that is the place where we make those decisions, right? That we weigh these two options intuitively. And the sextile to Ceres in Taurus is such a beautiful moment here, where she is really exemplifying that in a very natural way. You can only truly understand something if you take in both sides of it, right? This transition from Taurus to Gemini that is here, and, you know, Ceres is in conjunction now with the Pleiades. So the goddess of the grain, of agriculture, we talked about this, the grain that surrounds the hermit, right? The grain that is offered as sustenance and nourishment by the Vestal Virgins, right? Virgo in the sky as a constellation is holding the grain. Ceres is the goddess who is responsible for that cycle. And she, you know, is showing us that you have to embody both sides. You have to understand both sides, right? Both shoes have to be on the feet for you to really stand up and walk, right? Otherwise you're lopsided. And this, again, is giving us the ability, you can really invest this energy into our own mental concepts, our own mental status, and the way that we conceive of reality by weighing both of these things. We know that they have to, you understand both. In order to understand, you have to know both sides equally. And then when you do that, you can weigh you can weigh that scale within you, within your knowing, and your inner magician is really going to benefit from this today, because it's not going to come from outside of us, right? It's going to come from inside of us. And even if we are gathering information from outside of us, which is what Mercury does, we apply the mouse, right? The subtle cues, the internal shifts in our energy field. It's so important to know what it feels like in your body when things are true and when they're not. And that takes a long time sometimes, and we don't have time anymore, right? We have to really get into that practice. So for me, for instance, I'm going to institute a 30-day challenge that's going to lead up to roughly the next full moon in Aquarius of daily Reiki master attunements, right? Getting myself up to speed and committing to the process that allows me to be able to feel those differences. So there's that sextile right there today. So, and as we move forward, we also, like I said, Black Moon Lilith, I'm going to show you on this chart here. Black Moon Lilith is in a conjunction with the North Node. Okay, you see it right here at Antares. Black Moon Lilith, right? The space that represents the space that represents the space that represents the void on the opposite side of the moon's apogee, right? So the furthest point away in the moon's orbit from the Earth, the perigee, I think. I always get them confused. Black Moon Lilith is the midpoint in that space, right? It is the representative of our deepest desire for self-preservation, to claim our own power, to be very directly connected to the planet. But when she is not aspected very well, when we are unconscious of this potential within us, we act out of that self-preservation, and we act out of this need to be in power as opposed to empowered, right? And so she meets the North Node, Rahu, today, which is having us take this deep dive, right? To take the nosedive, for better or for worse, we make the decision, and this is where we're headed for our collective evolution, is in this direction. And so Black Moon Lilith will give us the this depth of survival instinct to do this, right? Or it will work against us, and we will find ourselves making taking that nosedive and not necessarily taking that nose. It's like we could very well in the midst of it change our mind, and we need Lilith to give us that energy, that deep sense of empowerment that she represents, to fulfill this, right? And they're both in opposition to the South Node, which is Antares. So it's just an interesting dynamic today that can really fulfill the need to take this dive, to go into these spaces. And there's so much imagery today about this, because we really do need to take this dive from where we've been during this scrimmage match, because it's going to actually matter coming down the pipeline, right? And this is a constant process every single day, multiple times a day now. We are kind of like being brought back to where am I rooted, right? Where are my roots? Are they strong? And how is that going to stabilize me in the midst of chaos? And you're going to see here that after Venus passes over Alpha Draconis, she's going to be in a T-square with the node. So we'll talk about that in a couple of days when it's more exact. So, boy. So then the moon comes into a conjunction with Neptune, as we see here. So she comes into, this is going to be this afternoon, noon-ish on, noonish, 1 o'clock on the West Coast. So we find the moon meeting Neptune retrograde, and this is where we just can't really distinguish between us and our, materializing our conscious ideal or our unconscious desire. So it really depends where we have already found ourselves in terms of being conscious of our ideals or allowing our unconscious desires to do the driving. This is going to make itself very known, and this is, to me, the disappointment that's kind of at the heart of the matter is going to be influenced by Neptune and the moon coming together. Beautiful, dreamy, inspirational, imaginative, really showing how we can give of ourselves at a feeling-based level in our emotional landscape, within us to this conscious ideal. It really could go either way, and it really depends on where we are finding ourselves. Like I said, who's driving our conscious ideals or unconscious desires that are being manipulated. So that's important to realize, because that's going to make itself very known, especially because Neptune's retrograde. So it's going to be really obvious. There's not a lot of fog involved here. It's an internalized process of having to look at ourselves in relation to the collective unconscious. So That happens. That happens today. And then Mercury enters Leo, right? And Mercury enters Leo. And then from there, the moon is going to make another sextile to Pluto, right? So right around the same time that Mercury enters Leo, the moon's going to make this sextile. And this is when we start to, realize the time has come for us to go ahead with our own subjective actualization, whatever our project is, whatever seed point is going to be for our growth. The moon at this position in Pisces is the idea that we start to realize that it's time for each of us individually to now come back into a seed point of form. And a sextile with Pluto, right? Again, there's that investment opportunity because Pluto is showing us all the underlying current, how deep the swamp really is and how it's like even under the surface. We think we're going to drain the swamp and get to the bottom. Turns out there's like an undercurrent under that is really at the root of all of our issues. And so Pluto retrograde, of course, is pulling everything back. As the swamp drains, you get to see more and more and more. And then Pluto is just like, oh yeah, by the way, let's start digging in the bottom of this lake bed or this swamp and really see what's going on under there. And when we do that, then again, we can invest that transformational potential within us to the moon and allow ourselves to address this in our own unique way, the way that we were meant to as sovereign individuals, right? And with Mercury coming into Leo at this same time, right, the blood rushes to our head in terms of giving, the Kundalini is released, goes right up to the head and allows us to consciously manifest, while at the same time, internally and very deeply, we realize now what direction we need to go in, where we need to put our focus, because we saw very clearly when the moon met Neptune, what it is that we are giving all of our vital energy to. And then from there, Mercury is in a quincunx. It comes into Leo and comes into a quincunx almost immediately, as you can see here with Jupiter retrograde. It is so close to coming back into Aquarius, which will happen, I believe, tomorrow. So this quincunx here will, force an adjustment because Mercury, the blood rushing to the head literally and allowing us to manifest from that place, to hold and to consciously manifest from that energy. Jupiter, of course, retrograde in the first degree of Pisces is like, you're trying to act consciously on this passion and this lust and this ambition that is like erupting through you, where Jupiter is just like, yeah, by the way, though, it's not, we still are managing this entire space that Jupiter in Pisces represents, right? It's expanding and managing the entire marketplace of ideas, of experiences, of past, present, future, right? Pisces is everything. And the morphogenetic field, the collective unconscious, all of the experiences that we could have. Jupiter is managing this space within us, right? This expansion within us of all of these possibilities. And if we have been, this has been, I think, the retrograde has been a struggle because when it came into Pisces to begin with, there was a lot of really good luck with people, especially depending on where you found Jupiter in your chart. And so there's a massive expansion here. And then when it retrograde, it's just like, oh, by the way, I'm just going to show you what's possible, but we're going to go back into this space now. And so while there's this eruption of blood rushing to the head, literally with Mercury involved, we will have to adjust ourselves because Jupiter is like, well, that's great, but I'm managing this entire space within you of what could be, and I'm managing the marketplace. I don't have the mind doesn't have full range to engage in this space when the blood is like pumping and rushing to the head, right? And so again, it'll kind of force an adjustment, right? We have to force this adjustment, or we have to acknowledge this inconjunct so that we can adjust ourselves, because we don't want to, oh gosh, how do I say this without being gross? We don't want to just like shoot off. And like I said, with Mars in conjunction with Regulus, there's a lot, and the sun now in Leo, there's a lot of potential to do this, and we have to utilize Venus. Venus in conjunction with Alpha Draconis. So I want to talk about that real quick before we wrap things up. So Draconis, right? The Draco starseeds, when they come in at their highest, right? When they are of the light, they show the incredible potential that the Draco signature represents. And it's very interesting how much Harry Potter can be utilized here to understand a lot of these archetypes. I mean, this is why that series was so popular, I think, because she was able to really tap into very deep archetypes of human experience, which any good writer or storyteller does. I mean, that's what you're doing. But the Draco, right, Draco Malfoy, the Slytherin house, was inseparable from everything else. You need that aspect in order to have balance. And so the reptilian signature and the Draco signature is very powerful and has the capacity to really see the Dracos. They fall into positions of power. They're able to manipulate people emotionally to get what they want. Self-preservation, if that is your primary motive, just like with using the Kundalini, right? If the Kundalini is released and you're still holding on to your desires of an earthly or ego-based nature, if you're focused on conceit, if you're focused on self-preservation, then you act through these gifts and these incredible potentials that the reptilian nature holds, or the Draco nature holds. You hold these or you act out in a way that is very inappropriate and disempowering other people. So how can you do this with Venus here? What can we learn from this position? The learning how to manage the emptiness of the waiting, right? We want things, and there's their Chiron in Aries right now. It's retrograde. Like, we cannot get around the wounding that continues to be, the wound that keeps getting poked about. We want things to happen now. We know the potential for the awakening on a full level is right here, right now within each of us. But every time we bump up against it, we have to feel the poking of the wound within us. So Venus, as much as she really struggles in Virgo, she's in her fall position at this degree, in conjunction with Alpha Draconis, she can hold the resonance of the Draco by waiting for the right time to strike, right? Gathering the momentum, gathering the energy, allowing the Kundalini to the potential energy of the coiled serpent, just letting it grow and grow and grow. And when it's time for it to be released, that will become obvious, I think. But if we try to release it out of self-preservation, and, Venus is going to lead us to that place because she wants to be comfortable. She wants to be balanced. She wants to be harmonious. And, like I said earlier, with a reptile, if you really watch them, they are in total stillness. They're in camouflage with their environment. They wait for the right time to strike, and they have an incredible amount of patience. It's not even patience. It's just they can't utilize their energy more than what they have until it's time, right? It's kind of like a large cat, right? That they expend all this energy in one big burst when they're chasing their prey, and then they need to rest and recuperate. It's kind of the same, but not really, because the reptile is able to lie in waiting until it's time to strike. And I know that this is difficult, but this is the best thing we can do with this Venus energy right now. This is not about being complacent and not doing anything. This is about letting the potential energy within us be coiled, and to utilize that contraction as much as the spinning of the wheel that we talked about yesterday, right? It's just as important, because otherwise then we just either, like I said, we act out of self-preservation, and then we're utilizing that energy for ego-based desires rather than our divine nature. And then we just end up wasting our energy anyway. And Venus doesn't want, is not powerful in Virgo. So this is a way that we can utilize this position at the most potent. So, wow. Whew, I just came back. Sorry, guys. Now, this has been happening a lot more where I'm really dropping out a lot of times as I'm starting to bring these messages through. So, but I'm back now. So I'm going to leave it here and invite you to join Catalyst Energies on Telegram and Facebook. You can find those links in the description box below. You can also book a reading through the website. That's also in the description box below to see how these energies are impacting you directly. I have an offering or a service that's like a lunar transit reading. So it just gives you a really basic rundown of what to expect with the lunar cycle in your chart. And it's actually very moderately priced, and you just get a sense of what to expect with this lunar cycle and the upcoming new moon and full moon. So that's something that I like to bring up. There's a lot of different types of services that address a lot of different types of readings in what I have to offer. So I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Take very good care of yourself today. Let me know how you're doing as the swamp drains, right? It is kind of a soap opera, but we are in the soap opera. We are part of it. We are not, just an idle observer, but at the same time, we're both of those things, right? So embody the observer, getting into the more subtle observational framework like the mouse, for instance, but also speak your truth compassionately, stand in your power, stand up for yourself, and be part of this process at the same time as you're sitting back and observing. This is really how we ascend to the highest version of the age of Aquarius. Otherwise, we might as well just accept that we're going to be the Borg and connected to some 5G tower and be controlled for the rest of eternity. So that's a pretty dark possibility, but it's there. I don't feel like that's where we're actually going to get to. I think enough of humanity has made the decision now to not be part of that. It's just going through the process of what that's going to feel like in real time and emotionally that I think we need to be prepared for, so that we can stay on this trajectory of the awakening of humanity. So I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.